Did you know that in some places you can literally be taxed for being too attractive? Or that there's a country where you pay extra taxes just for having a beard? Welcome to the absolutely ridiculous world of tax laws that sound like they were written by comedians instead of lawmakers. I'm about to share 10 of the most hilariously bizarre tax regulations from around the globe that will make you question everything you thought you knew about government revenue collection. Before we dive into this tax comedy goldmine, make sure to hit that subscribe button because we're about to explore some seriously entertaining legal absurdities that your friends definitely haven't heard about. Trust me, these stories are going to be your new favorite conversation starters at parties. Let's kick things off with what might be the most entertaining tax law ever created. In ancient Rome, there was actually a tax on urine. Yes, you heard that correctly. The Romans were so desperate for revenue that they decided to tax one of humanity's most basic biological functions. But here's where it gets even more ridiculous. This wasn't just some random weird law that nobody enforced. Roman public toilets were actually profitable businesses because they collected urine to sell to tanners and launderers who used it for cleaning purposes. The government saw this thriving urine economy and thought, why not get our cut? Emperor Vespasian famously defended this tax by saying money has no odor, which became a popular saying that's still used today when people talk about questionable sources of income. Moving from ancient history to modern times, let's talk about Sweden's fascinating approach to taxing physical appearance. Sweden actually had a tax on attractive people. Now, before you start planning your move to Sweden thinking you'd be tax exempt, let me explain how this worked. The tax wasn't directly on being good-looking, but it was close enough to be absolutely hilarious. Sweden taxed cosmetic surgery and beauty treatments, but the really funny part was how they determined what counted as taxable beauty enhancement versus medical necessity. The government had to literally create criteria for what made someone attractive enough to warrant taxation on their appearance improvements. Imagine being a tax assessor whose job description includes rating people's looks for revenue purposes. But Sweden wasn't done with weird taxes. They also implemented what might be the most environmentally creative tax ever conceived. Sweden taxes carbon emissions from cow burps and farts. I'm not making this up. Swedish farmers have to pay taxes based on the methane emissions from their livestock's digestive systems. This means there are actual government officials whose job involves calculating how much gas cows produce and converting that into tax revenue. The hilarious part is that this has led to farmers trying to modify their cows' diets to reduce flatulence, creating an entire industry around bovine digestive optimization for tax purposes. Now let's travel to Russia, where they once had a tax that would make modern hipsters very unhappy. Peter the Great imposed a beard tax in the early 1700s because he wanted Russian men to look more European. Men who wanted to keep their beards had to pay a special tax and carry a beard token as proof of payment. The really funny part is that the token had an inscription that read, "Beards are a ridiculous ornament," which means the government was literally making people pay money while simultaneously insulting their facial hair choices. Imagine having to carry around a government-issued document that insults your appearance while proving you paid for the privilege of looking the way you want. Speaking of appearance-related taxes, let's discuss something that sounds like it came from a satirical government handbook. Several countries have implemented taxes on wigs and hairpieces. The logic was that wigs were luxury items that only wealthy people could afford, so they should be taxed accordingly. But this created the absolutely absurd situation where people were getting audited by tax officials who had to determine whether someone's hair was real or fake. Picture tax inspectors approaching people on the street asking to examine their hair for authenticity. The enforcement of these laws led to some of the most awkward government interactions in history. Britain deserves special recognition for creating some of the most creatively ridiculous tax laws in history. They once had a tax on windows, which sounds reasonable until you realize the unintended consequences. People started bricking up their windows to avoid paying the tax, leading to buildings that looked like they were designed by someone who had never seen natural light. The government was essentially taxing sunlight and fresh air, which resulted in entire neighborhoods that looked like they were built for vampires. The really hilarious part is that this tax lasted for over 150 years, meaning generations of British people grew up thinking that having too many windows was a sign of wealth that deserved government punishment. But Britain wasn't done with architectural taxation. They also had a tax on bricks, which led to people building with larger bricks to reduce their tax burden. This created a brick-size arms race where people kept making bigger and bigger bricks to minimize their tax liability. The government kept adjusting the tax law to close these loopholes, leading to incredibly specific regulations about exact brick dimensions. Imagine being a government official whose job involves measuring building materials to calculate taxes based on brick size ratios. Let's move to some modern tax absurdities that are still in effect today. New York has a tax law that distinguishes between different types of food based on preparation method, leading to some hilariously specific situations. A bagel is tax-free, but if you put cream cheese on it, suddenly it becomes taxable. The government apparently decided that the act of spreading cream cheese transforms a simple bagel into a luxury item worthy of taxation. This has led to New York delis having to maintain separate pricing structures based on whether customers want their bagels prepared or unprepared, creating what might be the most complicated breakfast ordering system in the world. Tennessee has a law that's equally ridiculous, but in a completely different way. They have a tax on illegal drugs. Yes, you read that correctly. Tennessee expects people who are breaking the law by possessing illegal substances to voluntarily report their criminal activity to the tax authorities and pay taxes on their illegal income. The state even provides tax stamps for illegal drugs, creating the surreal situation where you can be legally compliant with tax law while simultaneously being a drug dealer. The really funny part is that some people actually do pay these taxes, presumably because they're more afraid of the IRS than they are of law enforcement. California has managed to create tax laws that are so specific they sound like they were written by someone having a very detailed fever dream. They have different tax rates for different types of fruit based on how they're sold. Fresh fruit is generally tax-free, but if you slice it up and put it in a container, it becomes taxable. This means that the act of cutting fruit transforms it from a basic necessity into a luxury item in the eyes of the California tax code. Grocery stores have to maintain complex systems to track whether their fruit is whole or pre-cut for tax purposes. The most ridiculous part about all these bizarre tax laws is that they're not just historical curiosities. Many of them are still on the books today, meaning there are government officials whose actual job descriptions include enforcing these absurd regulations. There are tax collectors who specialize in beard verification, urine commerce, and fruit preparation methods. These people went to school, studied law or accounting, and ended up in careers that involve some of the most surreal government interactions imaginable. What makes these laws even more entertaining is that they often create enforcement challenges that are comedy gold. How do you prove someone's hair is fake? How do you measure cow flatulence for tax purposes? How do you determine if someone is attractive enough to warrant beauty-related taxation? These questions have led to some of the most bizarre court cases and government procedures in legal history. The existence of these laws also reveals something fascinating about human nature and government creativity. When governments need revenue, they'll literally tax anything they can think of, no matter how ridiculous it sounds. This has led to a global collection of tax laws that read like a comedy writer's dream notebook. These hilarious tax laws remind us that government bureaucracy can be unintentionally entertaining, and that somewhere in the world, there's probably a tax on something you never imagined could be taxed. The next time you're complaining about your regular taxes, just remember that you could be living somewhere that taxes your facial hair, your cow's digestive system, or your decision to put cream cheese on a bagel. If you enjoyed learning about these ridiculous tax laws, make sure to subscribe for more fascinating legal absurdities from around the world. What's the weirdest tax law you've ever heard of? Let me know in the comments below.